Super Bowl. 12 days away. You can watch it on NBC on Sunday night, February 1st. On the call, along with his partner, Chris Collinsworth, will be Al Michaels. Al joins us now. And Al, how many Super Bowls will this be that you've called?
Paul, this will be number 9, and I actually was involved in ABC's first ever coverage, which was back in 1984, San Francisco against Miami. It was Marino's only Super Bowl. Montana won his second. Bill Walsh was the coach. Don Shula, of course, on the other sideline. And I co-hosted the pregame, halftime, and postgame shows with Jim Lampley, O.J. Simpson, and Tom Landry. So that was my one pregame experience, and then I did my first Super Bowl in 1988 in San Diego when Denver led Washington 10-0 at the end of the first quarter. We thought it would be a rout, and it was a rout. Washington scored the next 42 points to win 42-10.
What's a lesson that you learned in the booth back in 1988 that you can still apply to what you're trying to do Sunday, 9 Super Bowls later?
Well, be prepared, obviously, which is a given. I learned then that the game can get away, and it can get away very quickly, thanks in good measure that day to Doug Williams, 4 touchdown passes in the second quarter. Now we go into the second half, and there's no game. Now it's just a matter of trying to keep the people entertained and informed and have a little fun with it. It's a lot easier to do a game that goes down to the end. Of the 8 Super Bowls I've done, Paul, 4 of them have gone right down to the last 20 to 30 seconds. One of them went right down to the end to the 1-yard line with Kevin Dyson tackled by Mike Jones. Otherwise, that game, St. Louis, Tennessee, would have gone to overtime. 3 of them have been total routes, and one was pretty good. Pittsburgh against Seattle a few years back, which was 21-10, had the makings of maybe a very dramatic finish, and then a holding call on Sean Locklear of Seattle turned that whole game around, and Pittsburgh went on to win the Super Bowl.
You mentioned at the top of that list of what you could learn from 1988 and apply a week from Sunday night when the Patriots play the Seahawks on NBC. You said be prepared. And I'm wondering if 2 weeks feels like it's too much to be prepared for you or too much preparation, because clearly during the season, you only need 6 days to give everybody the feeling that you are extremely prepared.
Well, our crew, Paul, we look at it as a year-round thing, and it's not as if we're just getting to a Monday and saying, okay, we have a game on Sunday night. We follow everything all year long. We've had the Patriots 4 times this year, 3 in the regular season, and we did their playoff game against Baltimore. We've had Seattle 3 times. We had them 3 times last year as well. So we know these teams extremely well. It's not a matter of going back to square one. We're way down the line with that. I think what we try to do now is just find something that's a little different, because over the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, there'll be stories about everything and anything, and people will hear the same story multiple times. So one of the things we try to do is find something a little different that's interesting and something that people either haven't heard about or don't know much about.
Mr. Michaels, Brian Westbrook here, and I got 2 questions for you. And you just mentioned one thing. Tell us one of the favorite stories that you've kind of learned in the couple weeks in between the last AFC and NFC championship game in the Super Bowl that you've learned about either a team or a player. One of the most interesting stories, and then also let us know on your 9 Super Bowl games that you've covered, which one was your favorite one?
Well, number one, Mr. Westbrook. I'm not Mr. Michaels. What is this? Come on. We've had a lot of meetings through the years.
I know, that's right.
So, number one, I would say that my favorite Super Bowl to cover would have been Arizona against Pittsburgh back after the 2008 season in Tampa. And that was a phenomenal game because here was Pittsburgh, this regal franchise, and they belonged there. And what were the Arizona Cardinals doing in the Super Bowl? They'd been routed 50-0 by New England in December. Chris Collinsworth had kidded around on a pregame show. This is the worst team to ever get to the playoffs. And then they stormed through the playoffs. They beat your Philadelphia team in the NFC Championship game that year. And then they go on to almost win the Super Bowl. Larry Fitzgerald has a postseason for the ages. And then you have those 2 iconic plays, James Harrison running back, the interception at the end of the half, 100 yards with the clock running out. So if he doesn't get into the end zone, they can't even kick a field goal. And then Roethlisberger leads the 93-yard drive at the end of the game, which culminates in Antonio Holmes making that phenomenal catch in the corner of the end zone. So that would be my favorite game. But I think my favorite story would be back in '99 when the Rams get to the Super Bowl. And remember, that's the year that the Rams in the off season had given Trent Green a gigantic contract. Mm-hmm. So now they're playing a preseason game against San Diego. Rodney Harrison comes in and sacks Green, and Green winds up either breaking his leg or tearing up his knee. I forget which, but he's done for the season. So now all of a sudden, who was St. Louis's backup quarterback, a team that had been 4-12 the year before to begin with? So they're not going to be a Super Bowl contender. And they bring in a guy named Kurt Warner, and even the owner of the team, Georgia Frontiere, thought that this was Kurt Warner, the running back from Seattle from the 90s. So what is this all about? So John Shaw, who's the president of the team at that time, when I saw John, he was telling me about the night that it all happened in preseason, and John had to see Georgia about, what was going on. And John was, he had his head in the soup. They had dinner that night, and John is, he can't get his head out of the soup because he's going, oh, my God, we lost Trent Green. What are we going to do? He tells Georgia about this guy named Kurt Warner, and she says, John, come on, cheer up. Kurt Warner, this guy could be the next Johnny Unitas. So I told that story at the end of the Super Bowl in '99, and I said, you know what? Georgia believes in astrology. It had to be in the stars because we all know what happened. Warner goes on to have a phenomenal year. The Rams go from 4-12 to Super Bowl champions, and Kurt's the Super Bowl MVP. That would be my favorite story.
And Kurt is somebody, Al, that I've known for the last 30 years. I grew up competing against him in Eastern Iowa, and he still to this day, I believe, even though we're friends, is mad at me because Hayden Fry gave one scholarship in 1989 to a quarterback in Iowa, and it was me.
No, really? I didn't know that story. That's great.
Instead of him. And I thought for a while, Al, he was kind of kidding with me, but then I kind of realized he's still a little upset about this. And I said, you know what, Kurt, it worked out pretty well for you. Worked out very well.
Things worked out well.
Brian Westbrook, Paul Burmeister sitting in for Dan Patrick. We're talking with Al Michaels, who'll have the call along with Chris Collinsworth for Super Bowl 49. I'm wondering, just because I still get nervous for things, Al, I'm wondering when Fred Gaudelli is counting you down on Sunday night, 30 seconds left until you're on the air, 9th Super Bowl, how nervous will you be?
Well, you'll be anxious, I think, more than nervous. And I pretty much think of it as I love horse racing. So you're a horse in the starting gate, and you want to break cleanly because a lot of times if you come out of the gate and you stumble or you throw your jockey or something, that's not the way you want to begin things. So once we get going, and I've heard the players talk about it too. No matter how big the stage is, it's almost like that first play, and there's contact or whatever, and then you once you get going, you're fine. But the anticipation before the game, sure, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, I guess, in a way. You can let it overwhelm you. I think, though, at this point in my life and career, I've been down the road. I've been to a few rodeos, so I know how to get there. That doesn't mean you don't feel it when it's going to happen. And I go back to when I was in my mid-20s, and I'd wound up with the Cincinnati Reds #1 job. This is 1972, and in those years, if your team won the pennant, you got to do the World Series on national television with Curt Gowdy and Tony Kubek. So the Reds win the pennant. I'm doing the World Series, Cincinnati against Oakland on NBC, national television, and I swear, when the camera pulls out and it's Gowdy introducing me, the only thing that was in my head, and I couldn't get it out, was, please, God, when I open my mouth, let air come out. So it was crazy. It's like, my swing thought in golf is, please, God, don't let me whiff. So you don't want to have these negative thoughts, but you can't get rid of them. And fortunately, Gowdy introduced me, and air did come out, and away you went. And, once you get going, you feel great.
What is, as we get to a much more important topic here, Al, what's the over-under on dinners you're going to have with Dan Patrick next week?
Well, 0, because I talked to him yesterday, and he's out here, and right now, doing some stuff. I don't know. He's playing Mr. Hollywood this week. But next week, Dan's a busy guy, and he likes to name drop and hang around studs, and he's got this Hollywood thing going. So, you know what? I'll tell you what. The actual number is 1 because our boss, Mark Lazarus, is having a dinner for all of us on Tuesday night. So Dan and I will be breaking bread on Tuesday.
Is it possible, and this could be a poll question, is it possible for Dan Patrick to big-time Al Michaels?
I love when he does it too. It's fantastic because look, Dan is a guy. He's living there in Southern Connecticut. He needs to get out. He needs the bright lights of Hollywood. I'm glad that he's out here. He's going to like 8 restaurants a night, walking out hoping that Access Hollywood will be there to interview him on the curb.
Kind of like a celebrity. It's like being out with a celebrity when you spend time with Dan that way.
Right. Oh, it's fantastic. It's just great.
Mm-hmm.
And he's. I hope you guys are behaving back there because he feels like when the cat's away, the mouse are going to play. But I've been watching you guys shooting hoops this morning. You look great.
These
Keep it
guys
up. Have fun.
These guys run a tight ship. Hey, Al, great to talk with you. We'll see you down there in Phoenix, and have a great time prepping for the game.
Paul and Mr. Westbrook, good to be with you guys.
Thanks,
Take
Al.
care.
All
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
That is Al Michaels, not Mr. Michaels.
Nah,
Brian
not
Westbrook
Mr. Michaels, but you want to give him the respect that he deserves. He's earned it.
Right.
I have to give him the respect that he deserves. And now I could call him Al.